In 1997, GoldenEye would be released on the N64, becoming just about the biggest James Bond game of all time. And for the next decade, the developers would attempt to replicate GoldenEye with varying degrees of success. Amongst the many games released, one of them was 007 Nightfire, a first-person shooter that used Pierce Brosnan's Bond face and also had its own original plot. There would be 3 different versions of Nightfire made, one for all the main home gaming consoles and a different version for the PC that wasn't as good. Interestingly enough though, there was a 3rd version made for the Game Boy Advance, which is one of my personal favorite Game Boy Advance games and the version that I will be reviewing today. Nightfire on the Game Boy Advance is a very ambitious first-person shooter. The game is divided up across 9 different levels and is roughly around 2 hours long. The game's story is displayed through images and text, with the images literally just being frozen cutscene shots from the main version. The core mechanics of Nightfire are really the same as literally every other James Bond game, with you being given a list of objectives, such as finding items and keycards, accessing computers, or saving NPCs. Unfortunately, in this version, they don't kiss you after you save them. Sigma Bond! While the majority of missions have you go in guns blazing, surprisingly enough, there are actually some stealth sections to this game too, as well as 1 or 2 missions where you have to use a jetpack and a laser beam weapon. And of course, like every James Bond game, you will have a variety of gadgets and weapons that you will be using throughout most of the missions, from a laser beam wristwatch to a grappling hook. One thing about Nightfire that I really like is its gunplay. Every gun in this game just feels good to shoot, and there are quite a few of them to it. Nightfire is pretty solid, and the fact that its levels are pretty large and manages to play music in all of them is a pretty impressive feat. Nightfire is a very ambitious Game Boy Advance game, which is just as much to its detriment as it is to its success. In Nightfire, you not only look left and right, but also up and down as well, not to mention having to crouch, jump, and strafe in both directions. Just look at this control scheme.
What the hell is even—
The second major issue is that Nightfire is brutally hard, which is for a couple of reasons. There are no checkpoints in any of the 9 levels that Nightfire has, and some levels take around 20 minutes to complete, which means that dying, getting spotted in a stealth section, accidentally killing a non-hostile NPC, or failing to complete an objective will immediately result in a mission failure. Every level in Nightfire took me multiple attempts to beat, especially the last 3 levels. It doesn't help that James Bond moves differently than how most people would in first-person shooters. In games like Doom, movement is quick and snappy, but James Bond doesn't walk in Nightfire. He accelerates. When you press to move Bond, he starts off at a slow pace and progressively speeds up. Because of this, unless you're already moving before the enemy starts shooting at you, taking damage is borderline inevitable in firefights. If I had to describe Nightfire's levels, they are more of a trial and error kind of experience, as things like hidden snipers or ambushes from behind are commonplace in the later levels. Despite Nightfire's issues, Nightfire is still one of my personal favorite Game Boy Advance games. It is flawed, it is challenging, and it may not be the greatest looking first-person shooter, but I've always found this game to be rather charming. It may be flawed, but it's a fun experience nonetheless, and if you like James Bond games, I would recommend giving this one a try.